Okay, so I think we're in a good place to get started. Give people a few minutes. There's a good number of you now. So I'll go ahead and start introducing our webinar. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Liebe Canada Books webinar on exporting to Slovenia. My name is Gabrielle Echeverry, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Liebe Canada Books. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Today's presentation will be given in English, as many of you know, and should take about 60 minutes, in addition to the time set aside at the end for your questions. La présentation d'aujourd'hui sera en anglais et devrait durer environ 60 minutes, et nous avons prévu de temps à la fin pour répondre à vos questions. Pour accéder à l'interprétation vers le français, cliquez sur l'icône au bas de votre écran dans les commandes pour la réunion. L'icône rassemble un globe. Par la suite, sélectionnez la langue de votre choix, qui en ce cas sera le français. For those who do not require interpretation, please leave the interpretation feature off. After the presentation is complete, we'll be taking questions in both languages via the Q&A function, which should be visible on your screen. Feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar, and we will collect them for the Q&A session at the end. Nous vous invitons à poser vos questions via la fonction questions-réponses. N'hésitez pas à soumettre vos questions tout au long du webinaire. Nous les recueillerons pour la séance de questions à la fin, qui aura lieu à la fin. If you encounter any problems or have questions relating to the platform, please message me as the host via the chat function. You can also message my colleague, Elina Tagnon, who is on board to help us today if needed. Si vous rencontrez des problèmes ou si vous avez des questions au sujet de la plateforme, veuillez m'envoyer un message privé en tant que host. Vous pouvez aussi envoyer un message à ma collègue Elina qui est ici pour nous donner des appuis techniques si nécessaire. Now, to get to the presentation, hopefully everyone who needs the interpretation function has had a chance to set it up. But please, again, let us know if you have any trouble. We're very pleased to be hosting today's webinar, providing key insights on Slovenia, the guest of honor country at this year's Frankfurt Book Fair. Slovenia reflects both Europe's rich cultural diversity and its own unique and independent identity. Despite its relatively small size, Slovenia ranks second globally in terms of books published per million residents. Today's presentation will provide an overview of the Slovenian book market and the opportunities and challenges it presents for Canadian exporter publishers. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Miha Kovac, who will be giving us a glimpse into this year's Frankfurt Guest of Honor country. Hello, Miha. Good to see you. Miha is professor. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I guess it's very late evening for you,
Yes.
I suppose.
Yes.
Well, yes, we're especially grateful to have you here given the timing. But as many of you probably know from perhaps seeing Miha elsewhere, who's already done quite a lot of work on the Guest of Honor project for Frankfurt, but is also probably seen on our website. Miha is a professor at the Department of Library and Information Science and Book Studies at the University of Ljubljana. In his publishing career, he worked as editorial director of the two largest Slovenian publishing houses, DZS and Mladinska knjiga. I hope I got that sort of okay. And he's worked as well as editorial director of the Slovene edition of National Geographic magazine. He began to lecture at the University of Ljubljana at the Department of Information Publishing Studies and Library Sciences in 1999, and between 2011 and 2021, he was head of digital development at the biggest Slovene publishing house. He is also author of more than 50 articles and 4 books on book history, reading, and book publishing. His main research interest is publishing and reading statistics and educational publishing. And currently, as I alluded to before, Miha is working as curator of the Slovenia Guest of Honor program at the Frankfurt Book Fair. Welcome, Miha, and thank you for joining us today. I'll turn the mic over to you now so you can get started.
Okay, good afternoon again. I'll start sharing my screen. Yeah. Okay, and I move to the first slide right now. Let me know if the slides will not move, because this means that we have a problem, but hopefully this will work.
Looking good so far.
Okay, thanks. As Gabriel said, I will do a very short overview of the basics of the Slovenian book market regarding the book buying habits. I'll introduce you to the key players, We'll talk a little bit about audio and ebook market, and of course about many other things. But first of all, one important question: what the heck is Slovenia? And the answer is very simple. It's a country which, if you look at it from a distance on a map, it looks a little bit like a chicken, and it's very small. It's one of the smallest European countries. Its population is only 2 million inhabitants, what is actually 2/3 of Toronto. So it's really, really a small country. But on the other hand, it has many interesting features. It's a member of European Union and NATO since 2004. Our currency is euro since 2007, and our GDP is somewhere between, let's say, South Korea and Czech Republic. It's $30,000 per capita. What makes life in this country comfortable enough? Even more so because Slovenia is number 7 in Global Peace Index, what means that there is very low level of crime in Slovenia. You can safely walk around during the night wherever you are in Slovenia, and there is also, Slovenia is not very militarized country, although unfortunately these things are a little bit changing in last year, because we have quite close war between Ukraine and Russia, and of course our hearts are fully on the side of Ukraine. We are a little bit less happy than peaceful because we are number 22 in World Happiness Index, that what puts us somewhere between France and Costa Rica, and we are even less innovative because we are number 33 in Global Innovation Index. Besides this, what's important to point out is also that it's one of the greenest countries in the world, because 60% of our territory is covered in forests where all kinds of wild animals live, and we really like this. What should be also stated is that Slovenia has a brilliant position in Europe. I would say one of the best central positions, not only because it's really at the heart of Europe geographically, but it's also because it's in the mixture of all European cultures. Namely, this small church, which you see on the picture, is in a mountain called in Italian Monte Lusari, and in Slovenian Višarje, because this little church is in the border not only between Italy and Slovenia, but also between Slovenia and Austria. So it's a place where 3 countries meet, Austria, Slovenia, and Italy. But it's not only a place where 3 countries meet, but it's also a place where 3 different language cultures meet. Namely, if you would have a huge binocular and you would be able to see a few thousand kilometers far away, and if you would look eastward in this direction all the way across the Asia, and of course if you would ignore 1 billion Chinese, all the way across Asia till Vladivostok and the Japanese Sea, are the people who speak different Slavic languages. And then if you would turn around and look westward, and then all the way till the North Cap in Norway, are people who speak Germanic languages. And again, if you would turn westward to Italy, all the way across Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal, and all the way to South America, are people who speak Romanic languages. And for the little cherry on the cake, there is Slovenia borders also on the Hungary, where people speak Uralic languages. So it is actually, Slovenia is actually a country which is at the crossing of all the main European languages, and with this, with all the main European cultures. And Slovenian language, of course, is a Slavic language, but it's a beautiful mixture of all these cultural influences which are appearing in it. Even more so, the landscape is quite fascinating. This is the picture of Ljubljana, our capital. You can see a castle at the top of the picture, which is actually not a castle. It was a fortress in Middle Ages, and then it was a prison, and then it was a hospital, and then by the end of the 19th century, a very clever mayor of Ljubljana decided to build a tower at that fortress, so it looks like a castle. So Ljubljana makes an impression that it has a castle, from which the country is being ruled, what was never the case, of course. But as I said, what is amazing about the country is that it's so green. Namely, this picture was taken by me in the city park, and this picture was taken. The place where this picture was taken was about 1.5 kilometers, less than 1 mile far away from the Slovenian parliament. Of course, the picture was taken at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there are deer, so wild animals which come right to the center of Ljubljana, because the country is so full of forests. But that's not everything. Namely, in Slovenia, also three totally different landscapes meet. Again, if you look eastwards towards Hungary, there are these huge plains which go across Hungary, across Ukraine, all the way to Moscow. There is no mountains, just plains. And again, if you look westwards, there are Alps which go all up till across Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. And if you look westwards, there is, of course, seaside, Mediterranean, with all the beauties of Mediterranean, and again, in the direction of south, there are huge primeval forests in the karst region, which are full of bears, wolves, and all kinds of wild animals with which Slovenians are quite comfortable to cohabit. So it's really a country which is not only on the intersection of cultures, but also in the intersection of landscapes. And all these things happened in an extremely small place. One Austrian author, Ludwig Hartinger, who also translated a lot of Slovenian books to German, once said that there is no, this is the smallest place, this is one of the smallest places in Europe with the highest concentration of Europe, because we have all European landscapes and all European cultures mixing in this very small area. Unfortunately, this makes the weather quite bombastic sometimes down here, because last year we had huge drought and heat and a lot of wood forests. But this year we have floods because it's raining and raining and raining. So we have, due to the climate changes, we have quite an extreme weather, which doesn't make our life so comfortable as it was a few years ago. But it's not only the winds of climate that are heavily blowing here, it's also the winds of history, because here, as you can imagine, all kinds of different political interests were meeting. And because of this very fact, Slovenians were living in quite a few different countries. For example, my grandmother, who was born at the beginning of the 20th century, was born in Habsburg Empire, which was in our area, our home country, for around 400 years. This was the most stable part of our history. But then, tadam, Habsburg Empire disintegrated after the World War I, and Slovenia and my grandmother suddenly found themselves in a kingdom of Yugoslavia. And at that time, my grandmother got married, and with her grandfather, they built a house, which I inherited. So I'm sitting at the basement of this house. But the funny thing is that my grandfather never moved from this house in her lifetime, but she was living in 4 additional different countries, because Kingdom of Yugoslavia, with the start of World War II, suddenly disintegrated, and Slovenia became part of Italy. Ljubljana was called Provincia di Ljubljana. Of course, resistance starting to grow during that period. And when Italy capitulated, it was followed by Germany. So my grandmother suddenly found out to be a citizen of German Reich. And then with the end of the Second World War, Yugoslavia popped out in this territory in 1945. And my grandmother was happily living in Yugoslavia till 1991, when Yugoslavia disintegrated and Slovenia appeared. And I'm not putting here the Slovenian emblem because I don't consider it as a failed state. And then, of course, my grandmother didn't live long enough to become a citizen of European Union, what we are all Slovenians now. So the countries, the states in this area are changing very, very quickly. And because of this, how to say this, Slovenian state identity is not so strong as in some other more stable countries. But on the other hand, we have very strong cultural identity, because in such a windy place, to keep our identity, Slovenian identity, alive, culture and public life was very important. So we loved books in Slovenian, we love papers in Slovenian, we love movies in Slovenia, we love theater plays in Slovenia, we love to do science in Slovenia, Slovenian language. So Slovenia is a kind of Slovenian culture, let's say, is the most stable part of our identity. And of course, this is a monument in the center of Ljubljana, which is, as a matter of fact, dedicated to a poet, not to a politician or to a military leader, but to a poet who was writing his poems in the mid of 19th century, and is considered one of the fathers of Slovenian standardized language. So this is a little bit of the overview of Slovenian history, and now quickly to the Slovenian book market. What is typical for this book market, that it has this vertical organization in the way that publishers own bookstores or vice versa. Bookstore chains owns publishing houses. And this kind of book market organization is quite typical for European smaller book markets. This kind of vertical integration is typical, let's say, for the countries at the Baltics, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, for Slovakia, for Czech Republic, for countries in my part of the world, for Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, and so on and so forth. There is no intermediaries between publishers and booksellers. There is almost no distribution companies. There are just publishers who own bookstores. And because the market is small, there are only a few bookstores, 10 or 15 bookstores, who are specialized only for books. Most of the bookstores are very well experienced in selling other merchandise, like stationery, magazines, and so on. And it's quite similar with the publishers. They do all kind of, some of them do all kind of businesses. For example, the biggest Slovenian religious publisher owns also a tourist agency, because traditionally they were organizing pilgrimages to different parts of Europe, and then suddenly they found out that they can do also they could do also this so-called cultural tourism, and they organizing travels to exhibitions, opera concerts to other parts of Europe, and they're very well of this. So only about one half of their income are books. Similarly, the publisher number 2, called Uchila, is very good in retail business, because the owner likes to buy properties, buildings, stores, and is doing a lot of business with this. So on this basis, it's quite difficult to get exact data on the Slovenian book market, and we have to do with educated guesses, which I believe are quite accurate. Yet we have very good statistics about number of publishing titles, because this is done by Slovenian National Library. In last 10 years, they issue about 5,000 ISBNs per year, and we assume that around 3,000, a little bit more, book titles are produced for sales on the consumer market, which means 1.6 titles per 1,000 inhabitants, what is really quite a high number. According to the data of Slovenian Publishers Association, there are around 80 members, and 65 of them published more than 10 book titles in 2022. And I would say that these 80 members of Slovenian Publishers Association are actually the real publishers who are involved in book business in Slovenia. The turnover of the book market, when we try to clean all these tourist agencies and retail businesses who are part of publishing houses, the turnover of the book market is around 65 million euros, what is around, I would say, 70 million US dollars. And out of this 65 million, around 15 to 17 million is educational. Yearly, Slovenian publishers print around 4.5 million copies. The books are quite expensive. Average price of newly published title is approximately 21 euros, but average price of a title sold in the bookstore chain owned either by Mladinska Knjiga, which has the biggest bookstore chain with about 56 bookstores, or by Uchila, which has around 15 bookstores, is around 12 euros, because the people and booksellers love discounts. And for now, ebook and audiobook market are less than 1% of the entire book market, but we will return to this issue a little bit later. What should be also stressed, and this is actually a very important topic, about which we in Slovenia are in publishing circles are seriously discussing for last 20 years, but now it become very popular topic also in Germany, because they figured out that many books sold in German market are in English, and it's exactly the same in Slovenia. Our estimation is that around 15 to 20% of book sales in Slovenian book market are books in English. So actually the entire value of book market is higher than 65 million if we add this 15 to 20% of English books, and the entire value of the book market should be somewhere between 75 and 80 million euros. This market, this English book market, is of course very hard to measure. I worked for about 15 years for Mladinska Knjiga publishing house, and there we followed very closely what is happening with sales of English books in Slovenia. We were regularly, and the company is still regularly importing the English books. I think they're working with Gardner lately. And when we looked, for example, at the sales data for some book titles, the sales of the books in English in the Mladinska knjiga bookstores chain was higher than the sales of the books in Slovenian language. And there was this very simple rule: more demanding the book was, higher the sales in English were. For example, Margaret Atwood, if her book was translated to Slovenian, of course, then the books in Slovenia, the Slovenian translation started to sell. But I would say that with most, or even with all of her titles, the sales in English outsold the sales in Slovenian translation. So this is a very interesting issue which demands quite a lot of knowledge about publishing strategy, how to handle this kind of questions. In addition, Slovenian book market is heavily translation independent. I would say that about half of book titles published for trade market are translations, mostly adult fiction and non-fiction. This is again very typical for a younger population. People like myself are not that fluent in English. If you listen to my English and if you are following US politics, you might sometime hear talking Melania Trump, wife of Donald Trump, who is Slovenian, and she's speaking English with exactly the same accent as I do, because that's how we were trained in English in our primary and secondary education. But this new generation of kids who have access to internet, who listen to all kinds of podcasts, and who is having huge access to all kinds of English books, their English is really English, sounds much more American than my English, and about 85% of them are also read in English. At the university where I teach now, I do every year a very simple test, because I teach in the publishing course module, and I ask my students, what are you reading now? Put your books out and show me what you are reading. And I would say 80 or 90% of them put out the books in English, not in Slovenian. So this new generation is really very much in English language. I had the other day a kind of a fight with my youngest one, who is 16, and she came home with a book by Russian author Mikhail Bulgakov, Master and the Margaret, and in English. And I asked her, but why the heck are you reading this in English? We have in-house a Slovenian translation of this book. And she said, oh, I don't want to read this book in Slovenian. It's a complicated book and it's easier for me to read it in English. So simply put, this is becoming, with new generation, this will very likely become a serious issue, especially because all these English translations are cheaper than Slovenia. All these books, English originals, are cheaper than translations. So this is really one of the issues which we are dealing with the Slovenian book market. And if any of you will be in Frankfurt, do drop by to our professional pavilion, because we will have at least one panel discussing this issue with colleagues from Germany, from Libri, which is the biggest German bookstore chain, and with David Taylor from Ingram, who is one of the biggest importers of English books to Europe. If we look at the title production, you can see that English translations are about half of the books which are originated in Slovenian language, and it's absolutely the translational language number one. What is interesting is that translations from German are growing, especially as far as I talked with some Slovenian publishers. They mostly translate those English books which don't appear in English, because they open with this they open a really new window for Slovenian readers, because they cannot access this kind of books. And as you can see, these translations from German doubled between 2000 and 2020, and it goes the same with French translations, with Italian translations, with Spanish and Portuguese translations, but not with Russian translations, and because this Russian fiction never took so serious position as some other books. But basically, all these translations from other languages are growing because publishers assume that this is a kind of a new market for them, because these books are not accessible in English. So a few words about the biggest players in the market. Definitely the biggest player in the market is Mladinska Knjiga Group, which has around 40% market share in trade, about 25% market share in education, and about 60% or even more in book selling. Then we have Roku Sklet, which is the only publishing company owned by foreigners, because it's owned by a German educational publishing company, Klet, which has publishing companies in around 25 countries. But all the other Slovenian publishing companies are still owned by Slovenian companies. Mladinska Knjiga is owned by state investment fund, and if somebody wants to enter to Slovenian book market, the easiest thing is to buy, of course, Mladinska Knjiga, which is, by the way, not good only because it's good in Slovenia, but it's good also. It's an interesting company because also they have companies in Serbia and in Croatia. And you know, it's from Slovenian perspective, this is really a huge thing, because it would be like somebody would put in US market or in Canadian market Amazon, Penguin Random House, and Barnes and Noble under one roof. It's actually the biggest online bookseller, it's the biggest publisher, and it's the biggest bookstore chain. And this under one roof is in this building, which is at the center of Ljubljana. First 4 floors belong to Mladinska Knjiga. The whole building belongs to Mladinska Knjiga, but the first four floors belong to publishing house and to the bookstore chain, and the upper 3 floors are being rented to other companies. And for 10 years, my office was just behind this little girl reading book in this big poster. In the first 2 floors is the biggest Slovenian bookstore. One of the good things they do is that they do beautiful window shops. They adapt them to the time of the year, to the thematic, and it's really very, very attractive. I would say one of the best window shops in book selling I've seen around Europe. This is the inside of the company. This picture was taken by me, so it's not very good, and it was taken before the opening hours. And what is interesting is that this bookstore is also the oldest bookstore operating bookstore in Ljubljana, because it was opened in early 60s. This is the picture from, I think, 1965. And even back then, there was a lot of events in the bookstore, readings, and so on. This picture is from early 80s, and somewhere I use it because somewhere here, very, very behind, is me standing in a much younger edition than the person who is talking to you now. And of course, there is a lot of events in this big bookshop today. Besides this, in Slovenia, we have a huge book fair, which takes place in the last week of November, and it's very popular because it's a kind of an official opening of the Christmas shopping season. It's a typical B2C event and also a kind of literary festival. Last year, when the book fair finally fully recovered after COVID, we counted 45,000 visitors, what equals the book fair in Vienna. But of course, Vienna has 2 million inhabitants, and it's about 5 times bigger than Ljubljana. We run a lot of events with the book fair, between 200 and 300 literary readings, theater performances, small concerts, roundtables, and so on and so forth. And last year, for the first time, we calculated the turnover of the book fair, and it's actually around 2 million euros. And so this is really a huge event for Slovenian book selling. And it's full. You see, it's full. Whenever somebody says to me the book is dying, I start showing these pictures from Ljubljana book fair, because for the weekend it's really totally crowded. People love to come here, and they really love to spend a few hours there, browsing the books, going to discussions. And of course, as you can see, there are also quite a lot of young people, young authors presenting their books. We have a lot of foreign visitors. This person on the right-hand side is actually Axel Scheffler, the illustrator of Gruffalo, who is very popular visitor in Ljubljana, and whenever he comes, the hall is full with hits. So that's the situation now. If we do a really quick overview of how the market changed, is that there was a huge decline in the last 25 years. There was a huge decline of direct sales. When I started to work in publishing in late 50s, sorry, I'm not that old, in late 80s, when socialist Yugoslavia was falling apart, 3 companies, publishing companies, had huge network of door-to-door representatives who were literally walking around the country and knocking on the door of the people and selling books. And these books were very expensive, around 100, if we calculated their value to today's value, the cost was around $100 per copy. And these books were actually books about health, encyclopedias, cooking books, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, internet came and totally killed this type of the market. Then Reader's Digest was introduced to Slovenian market with its usual cycle. First, the sales were growing, and then the sales were going down. So what happened in this period of decline of direct sales was that all these a little bit more expensive books disappeared from the book market. But on the other hand, there was growth of bookstore sales, and other retail channels popped out. For the first time in the late 90s, Slovenian mega markets start to sell books, and another very popular place to sell paperbacks become actually gas stations, because they were open 24 hours, 7 days a week. and in some smaller places, gas stations actually become small stores which are selling not only food but also merchandise like books and magazines and so on. And as I mentioned, in this period, there was huge growth of English book sales. Educational market shrank due to the state intervention, but I don't really want to go to details about this because it's totally another and quite complex story. But the result of all these changes was the book prices went a little bit down, and with this also the total turnover of the book industry shrank. But what is interesting is that actually the number of produced and sold copies grow, because what we lost was this direct sale channel where a few books a year generated a huge turnover, and this was substituted with the sales of cheaper books in retail channels, either online or brick and mortar. And to produce a decent turnover, all these publishing companies had to publish more books. So in short, what happened to Slovenians working in publishing industry was that they had to produce more books, and they earned a little bit smaller amounts of money with them as before, what actually meant that suddenly we all had to work more in publishing than before. There is also very strange relationship between libraries and publishers in Slovenia. It's a kind of love and hate relationship. Namely, the library network in Slovenia is very widely used and highly developed. This is something what Slovenia inherited from its socialist times and even from pre-socialist times, because as I mentioned, public life, cultural life was very important for us. And as a consequence of this, there was this tradition of building public libraries. And when socialism collapsed, new governments which started to run Slovenia in new democratic circumstances didn't close down the libraries, what was the case in quite a few former communist countries, but actually invested more money to develop the library network. So we have around 265 library landing posts all around the country. And if you compare this to around, I would say, 70 or 80 bookshops, this is really a lot. And this is something actually what publishers cannot compete with, even more so because these libraries are in many small towns or even villages where there is no sense to open a bookstore because it would not be economically feasible and sustainable. And this shows also in the, let's say, book usage, because on average, 3 books per inhabitants are bought in Slovenia, but 12 books are borrowed from libraries by people who are older than 18 years. So we don't count school and educational libraries to this number, but this quite clearly shows that number of library loans is about 4 times bigger than the sales per head. As you can see from this basic statistic data about library network, the investment to the libraries was growing, and also the number of loans was growing. I would say till 2015, number of events in libraries was growing, number of book purchases was growing. But then after 2015, and this is partially, I believe, connected with the development of screen media, and then especially with COVID, the number of library members and number of library loans dropped for about 30%. And it will be quite interesting to see whether this number will recover. And of course, whether these numbers will recover depends heavily on what will publishers do in audio. But we will, as I said, come back to this a little bit later. This is a few pictures. This is Slovenian National Library, designed by the famous Slovenian architect Jozef Plečnik, who was one of the famous Central European architects. If any of you will sometimes go to Prague, and if you will go to Prague Castle in Czech Republic, significant part of that of Prague Castle was designed by Slovenian architect Jožef Plečnik. This is main reading room in the National Library. Besides this, we have many new modern public libraries. This is public library in the city of Gorica in the coastal region, and the architect quite stupidly made this big glass wall facing east. So every morning in summer, when the sun comes up, they have to switch on the air condition and use it during the day. So this is I usually show this to my students as a very nice building, but as a good example of not wisely built libraries. This is another one in the city of Ptuj, where they changed an old castle to the public library, and this one is more nicer. We love bibliobuses. By the way, this strange creature on this bibliobus is called Current, and that's how we like to dress for our main carnival, which is sometimes in mid-February. But these bibliobuses travel all around the country. So even if you live in the remotest village in Slovenia, there is a very high likelihood that every 2 weeks a bibliobus will stop at the designated time in your vicinity, and you will be able to go in and borrow the books which they have in the bus. Or if you will want to order something what they don't have, they might bring it to you if you order it online, or you can tell the librarian, and in next 2 weeks the book will come to you when the library bus will visit again. So this is really a good service which paid by the state, which provide books for nothing, and this is really something what quite often makes publishers a bit pissed off, because it's it's very difficult to compete with free. So the ebooks. First ebook in Slovenian was sold in a Slovenian ebook store, which was opened in July 2013. But a huge majority of Slovenian publishers opted to work with Library Ebook Network, which was free to library patrons and which was sponsored by the Library Network. And the problem with this library network is that libraries pay only one license for every 52 loans. So this is really financially, this really sucks. It's really bad for publishing industry, and I would say this effectively more or less killed the ebook market. The new story is starting now because audio is coming to Slovenia. The first audiobook platform was launched last month by Mladinska knjiga. There will be one more audiobook platform launched by another Slovenian publisher, and these two audiobook platforms will work on subscription basis. And of course, the both platforms plan that they will offer to their users also ebooks. So the idea is to start offering audio for subscription, and as a kind of a benefit or surplus, also offer to the users of these platforms ebook. And by this, both companies plan to pull the winds out of the public libraries and return the ebook and audio books back to the normal, let's say, publishing market. The only problem is that these are these two platforms are very likely not big. Slovenian market is not big enough for these two platforms, so one of them will very likely die. And what of course more worries me is that at the end of this fight, at a certain point, the libraries will be the winners of this battle again. But we shall see how this turns out. And now to finish this presentation, a few data on reading habits. We do, quite luckily, we did the first reading survey already in late 70s. And we used the people who did that survey used the methodology which they copied from Gallup. So they, and from National Endowment of Arts in US. So they got quite good questionnaires and quite reliable data. And ever since we repeat this survey every 5 years. And with the data which we got, we are not so happy, because about 1/2 of the Slovenian population does not read books, and this ratio didn't change in last 10 years. And our main worry is that about 1/3 of only 1/3 of the Slovenian parents regularly read to their children. In Norway, for example, the number of parents who regularly, which means 5 or 4 times a week, read to their children is about 80%. And this is one of the problems which we have, and that's where Slovenian publishers are working hand in hand with publishing, with the Ministry for Culture and Book Center, to change these attitudes with a lot of reading promotion campaign. We have very small home libraries, but on the other hand, as I said, our library loans are about the EU average. So to an extent, public library is an extension of home library for many people. The problem is that, as in many places in the world, between 2014 and 2019, we read quite a lot of heavy readers, those who read more than 20 books per year. And also the libraries lost a few members even in the pre-COVID period. We will repeat this survey in 2024, which means next year. And I'm a little bit optimistic, because some surveys, some small surveys which we did, are indicating that people are somehow returning to book reading. One of the funny things which we do, I don't know if there is something similar in Canada, but what we love is something what we do every summer, and it's this campaign which is called Reading Under the Treetops. We bring this is not something what is sponsored, what is run by the public libraries, but by one of the Slovenian non-governmental organizations. They go with books to the parks, to the city centers. They do events, and this is actually one of the parks in the center of Ljubljana. They try to create this cozy atmosphere with books. They bring books, they bring comfortable chairs, they bring even sprays for mosquitoes, which could be quite nasty in summer in Ljubljana, and people stop and read. This is, for example, at the Ljubljanica River, which goes through Ljubljana, and then we have another one in this picture was taken in, this library was not under the treetops, but let's say among in a big apartment area where a lot of apartment buildings are, and where a lot of young families live. And for the summer and late spring and early autumn, for many of them, this is a perfect place to go up in the afternoon or in the early evening to chat, to show the books to the kids, and so on and so forth. This is another this kind type of photo. And one of the things which I love most, actually, this is in the Slovenian Alps, 2,000 meters high. You go hiking, and after 5 hours of hiking, bam, you come to the library under the treetops, and you can even find there an old lady who tells fairy tales to families who come there to the children with their children. So for the end of this presentation, what Slovenians read, we have very few successful authors. We have a few popular crime authors. We have a few popular female authors. Erika Johnson, for example, she's an American living in Ljubljana, and she wrote a book in English about her life in Slovenia, about that of her Slovenian husband, and about her being widow. And this book was written in English and then translated in Slovenia, but it was chosen by the visitors of Slovenian Book Fair to be the top Slovenian book in 2022. And as you can see from these comparisons, if Slovenia would be a big country, then our top bestsellers would sell in really, really huge numbers. We actually started seriously to export books. Being guest of honor in Frankfurt actually tripled the number of translations from Slovenian. We do around our Slovenian publishers do around 200 contracts per year, what is really a brilliant number in comparison to what we had 20 years ago. And these are our top 10 export authors. And of course, the star number one is the crazy Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek, who really sells books in millions, in hundreds of thousands of copies, and who has some of his videos on YouTube has more than a few million views. Besides this, we have a very nice fiction writer, Drago Jančar, who is very popular in Germany. We have a new generation of authors, Ana Marvan, who is actually bilingual, writing in Slovenian and in German. We have a new generation of crime writers. Hopefully, sometimes we will have a kind of Slovenian noir crime trend. And of course, we have beautiful children's books. Helena Kraljic is the most translated Slovenian children's books author. By the way, Slovenia will be guest of honor in Bologna 2024, and we are investing a lot to promote our children's books. And with this, I came to the end of this talk, and I'm open to questions and answers. I forgot to show the picture of my cat at the beginning of the lecture, because when I become university teacher, somebody told me that whenever I show slides, I need to show a slide with a cat, because this enhances the sympathy of the audience towards the speaker. So I bought this cat, which is quite fat and very friendly, and of course that's how I will look like when this year's Frankfurt will be over. Well, thank you for listening to me, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Mia. That's great. That is a really excellent suggestion. I think I'll try to incorporate that into future PowerPoint slides. Make sure there's always a cat around. So I know some of you have to leave probably at the end of the hour. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me directly or to Miha, and we'll be happy to respond. But for questions that we've had so far, again, thank you, Miha. This has been really great. It's been really fun to learn about Slovenia as a country, as a culture, and also the book market. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when we're looking at other markets, that it's not just a market, it's a whole culture, it's a whole entity that is really important to understand. And so I think our first question here is a very direct question, and it's about the publishing market. However, and it's about distribution. So it's one of your earlier slides. So the question from Shane: does Amazon KDP supply directly to customers in Slovenia? Is there another POD company or solution? And is there specialized Slovenian online ordering system?
Well, this is longer story than it seems, because of course Amazon sells books to Slovenia, and I bought my first book on Amazon in 1996, and ever since I calculated once, and I find out that the value of money I used to buy book on Amazon equals the value of a car. So in 15 years. So I didn't tell this to my wife because she might be quite pissed off because of this. So yes, Amazon is very much present, and of course also the Amazon with Kindle and ebooks is present, but these things started to change with Brexit, because we were all purchasing books in Amazon UK because there was no customs. Now, if I buy a book from Amazon in US, besides paying postage, I have this nasty duty to fill a special form for customs, which then allows the customs to release the books and be supplied to me. So we all use Amazon UK, but then when UK exit European Union, we started to use Book Depository, which somehow managed, very likely from Ireland, to supply books to Slovenian customers. But then again, the new CEO of Amazon cut and killed Book Depository. So now most of the people are using Quarterly. And this is, I would say, this is quite big, actually. And this is something what we don't know the numbers about, but it's really big. Besides this, we have this. I would say that people still use Kindle, and I know this because I find out, and this will be also a few interesting panels in Frankfurt. I find out that there is a whole generation of new writers, Slovenian writers, mostly women, around 30 years old, who publish on Kindle, on Amazon Kindle, and they write in English. And one of them, she's actually a daughter of a good friend of mine, and he told me about her. I was not aware of this. He uses pen name Zui Ashwood, and last year she was among top 20 romance fantasy authors on Amazon Kindle chart. So she's really good, and this is really a new generation which, you know, not only reads in English but also writes in English. So English is really becoming, I mean, if this trend will continue, we will become a bilingual country in next 40 or 50 years. But regarding the distribution of the physical books to Slovenian market, as I said, the main distributor is Mladinska knjiga bookstore chain, and they still import books from UK on a regular basis, because, you know, if you import one container of books, it's much easier to handle the customs than if you import just one book. So, and I would say that as far as I remember, they imported about one container per month. That was the size of English imports of the books sold in the Mladinska knjiga bookstore chain. But the number of the books which come to Slovenia via Amazon or Wordery or Book Depository, that's something what only Jeff Bezos knows.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
By the way, he's just spending his holidays in the neighborhood in the Adriatic Sea. Yeah.
It sounds like a lovely neighborhood that you're in there, so it makes
Yeah.
sense. We have another question from Paula. She says, thank
Yeah.
you for the presentation. What are the names of the two digital platforms that will be distributing audiobooks and ebooks, and they will allow English publishers or English language
Yes.
publishers to distribute?
That's a big problem. One of them is called Mladinska Plus. It's owned by Mladinska Knjiga, and the other one is called Beletrina. And both companies are very much interested to distribute English books, but when they start talking to the big distributors of audio, these distributors don't care because everything is too small for them. And this is quite a problem, but I expect that in a year this problem will be somehow solved, because in this situation Mladinska Knjiga is in much better position because they have companies in Croatia and in Serbia, so they could cover more or less all Southeastern Europe with these books. But this is quite a regular problem, because all these big companies who distribute audio and ebooks in English, they have these big numbers in their heads. And when I started to work in publishing and we started to buy rights for translation of American and English books, the agents didn't care for us because we were too small. They didn't care for $1,000 contract. But then, of course, agents popped out who were specialized for this part of the world, and then they represented these big companies, and they did this small business for them in our region. So I expect that sooner or later something like this will become. And yes, I expect that all these big Slovenian platforms will have 1 or 2 million of English audio and ebook titles. That's the only way that this kind of platforms can be sustainable, and that's the only way to steal customers, of course, from Spotify, and which is quite strongly present in Slovenia already, and Audible, of course. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we already have those. The big players already have big players, literally and figuratively, already have a foothold there. If there are not any other questions, I thought I had one question is about you mentioned rights for translations and rights agents. So if some of our listeners wanted to get in touch with rights agents or try to find rights agents, would the website for the Slovenian Publishers Association be the best place to go? Is that kind of information available in a sort of centralized location?
You mean for selling rights to
Yes,
Slovenia?
and buying, yeah.
Well, for buying, there are two. There is no agents yet, but actually one of the things which is my dream is that there are two big companies, Mladinska Knjiga and Beletrina, who sell rights, and they're quite good at this. And I spent quite some time trying to persuade them that they should do a rights agency.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
As a kind of a joint venture, and then sell the rights of their authors and also some other authors abroad. But this is not happening yet. But my guess is that if somebody wants to sell rights to buy rights from Slovenia, is to stop at the stands of these two companies in Frankfurt, or at the Slovenian stand where one can get the information. And also for selling rights, these two companies are quite big.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, especially hopefully a lot of our listeners or our audience will be at Frankfurt this fall. Okay, well, I'll finish there because I think I have another question. Great. It's very exciting. Okay, Nicoletta, thank you. The question is, for books sold at a median price of 12 euros in bookstores, so heavily discounted, are royalties to the authors calculated on the regular price for 21 euros or on the discounted price?
That's a very philosophical question. I mean, for Slovenian authors, we have this system of subsidies So a publishing company can get a small subsidy with which the company pays a fee to the author, so that the author earns 2,000-3,000 euros, and this covers, let's say, the print run of let's say 2,000 copies, and from then on it's royalties on sales, and these royalties are usually calculated on the basis of turnover of the book. So actually it's calculated on this 12 euros. But I would say that this average price means, that there are some books in bookstores which are really heavily discounted, and these books are all older than 5 years, I would say. So for a new paperback book, the price is really 15, 16, 17 euros, and publishers start to, some publishers, and I hate this when they do this, they do, the first price is 20 euros, and after 6 months they lower the price to 15 euros, and that's their calculation, and that's their marketing trick. Oh, after 6 months you can buy the book for 15 euros. But what they do is that those books who remain unsold after, let's say, 5 years, they really sell them for 5, 6, 7 euros. But they don't do this all year long, but there are special times in the year when they do this, because if these books would be so devaluated all the year, then nobody would pay 15 euros for a book. So it's a kind of quite complicated system, which in the end of the day produces quite low average book price.
Okay, thank you. That's a good explanation of that pricing. I think so. That is the last question this time. I'm pretty sure I haven't missed any other ones. But as I mentioned before, if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to send them directly to Miha. You should all have his email address. There you go.
Yeah.
And a picture of his cat,
Yeah.
of his adorable cat. And you can,
Yeah.
of course, always email me directly, and I'll be happy to forward any questions along. And if you're at Frankfurt, please stop in at their stand and check out the pavilion while you're there. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Miha, for your presentation. Thank you so much to the interpreters for being here and providing the French language side of things to our French listeners, our French language listeners. And again, thank you to the Government of Canada for funding this. We mustn't forget. And if you have time, anybody who's still with us today, if you could give us your feedback. There's a link to the survey that we always have at the end of our webinars. Your feedback is very appreciated. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and thanks again for joining us today. Thank you, Miha. Have a great rest of your late night or evening.
Thank you. Thank
we'll
you.
see you
Yeah,
soon.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Take care. Yeah, goodbye.
Bye-bye.